Hey, what's up? Hello, this is Auntie Cubana coming back at you with another episode of the Unladylike Lounge podcast. And today I am joined by Jessie Gibbs. Jessie, how are you today?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, today we have some pretty deep stuff to talk about. First, I'll give you a minute to kind of tell us about yourself and brag on yourself a little bit and what we'll be talking about today.
So I wrote a book. It's called Girl Hidden. I have had so many people who have heard my story go, "You're going to put this in writing, right?" Because when you've been kidnapped twice as a child and you were in hiding for several years and had an FBI looking for you, people are like, "Huh, I
Yeah.
more details, please." What? No, this isn't. And I grew up just thinking this was a part of life. Like normal people had this happen to them. I had no idea. I'm the oldest of 8, and my parents were part of the Bill Gothard way of raising children. If you've seen Shiny Happy People, that's what I grew up under.
Mm.
Yeah, so it was a lot, but the story has a happy ending. It's a hard book to read. I mean, I tried to make it fun in the way that even though there was a lot of trauma in my childhood and a lot of hard moments, like genuinely hard moments, there was also a lot of magic and beauty. Like I grew up in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Like you can't get
Oh,
any prettier than that. And
right.
right, it's so gorgeous. The fireflies, I can't. So many fireflies. Oh,
Oh my gosh.
and I live out in the Seattle area now. We don't have fireflies. So every time I go back home, I'm like, look at the sparklies.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I wrote this book about 2 years ago, and it's been an incredible journey. My favorite thing about writing this book is all of the people that come back to me after they've read it or listened to the audiobook and started telling me their stories. Like,
Mm.
hey, I never told anybody this, but my dad, dot, dot, dot. I never told anybody this, but my mother was whatever. And even in the course of writing this book, certain things have come out. Like, I have a TikTok, and I posted one of my stories on TikTok and had somebody come back to me and go, okay, so your mom was a human trafficker. What? Wait, what? Oh, oh shit, she was. Oh my God. And I'm
Oh,
like, I'm a grown up. This happened like this year where all of a sudden I was like, okay, I have to just reevaluate my entire childhood. Give me a minute.
right.
Yeah.
And that's such a huge thing because it's like obviously my childhood and traumas were not nearly, anything that you experienced or anything like that, but I feel like anybody who goes through any type of trauma, especially as a child, we don't necessarily see it for what it is while it's happening.
Right.
And maybe even not when we're an adult until somebody else points out while we're sharing our stories like, hey, so this is what, and you're like, you
Yep.
know
And there's so many times when you're a trauma survivor where you're just be like, oh my gosh. And then this funny thing happened, dot, dot, dot. And you'll tell your story and like the room will go quiet. And like, that's not funny. That's really messed up, right? Like,
right.
is it? Oh gosh. Wait, you mean you didn't have this happen to you? What the hell?
Right, right. It's almost like, we're just sharing what was a Tuesday for us, and to everybody else,
Right.
like, that is insane. And you're like, oh, especially
Oh,
if you use humor or something to cope or to get through things, then people are really like, I don't
yes.
think I need to be laughing right now, and I don't know how you are. So I get
Yep.
it for sure, for
You
sure.
learn to adopt a lot of dark humor for sure.
Yes, absolutely. So why don't you take us back to kind of the beginning of your story and where it all started?
Okay, I'll kind of give you like the brief overview.
Okay.
So I wrote this book. Um, I started writing when I was 19, and I am not 19 anymore by any stretch. So it took me about 25 years to actually finish this book. And the reason for that was my mother is a charismatic narcissist. And so she likes to rewrite not only her own stories, but the stories of the people around her. And narcissists tend to pick one or two people to be their targets. And in my life, it was me and my little brother, Noah. So there's 8 of us. So the rest of the kids were played against us in different ways. We were punished differently than the rest of the kids. anyway, so when I wrote this book, I would write 2 or 3 chapters and go, okay, this is the story that I know. And then my grandmother, who was an amazing woman when she was alive, would start sending me boxes. When I turned about 22, she started sending me boxes of court documents and FBI files and missing child posters and, letters. I have every single letter that my mother wrote to her when she was pregnant with me. So I know everything that Mama was thinking during that period of time. So essentially what happened was my mother was in the Navy. At the tender age of 19, she had already had 6 abortions. And this was before abortions were legal. So she came into my life with a lot of trauma already established, right?
Yeah.
Youngest child of 4. Her dad was a Navy man. So, just following the family tradition
Yeah.
and trying to make daddy proud. And so she got shipped over to Rota, Spain. Well, while in Rota, apparently there's a couple of different stories about how I came to pass, but I kind of ended up going in the book with the story that Mama tells via her letters. And there's a lot of letters and files and court documents and quotes from these court documents in the book. So it was important for me to track down that actual information. So I would write, 2 or 3 chapters and then have to rewrite them because, wait a minute, this isn't true. I didn't know that wasn't a true thing. I grew up believing this. And now I have to start up, it was a huge deal.
Yes.
So Mama's in Rota, Spain, finds out that she's pregnant yet again, and decides, of course, I'm just going to go get an abortion. No big. This is just a thing that I do.
Right.
But then she found out that she could get out of the Navy if she was pregnant.
Oh.
So she decided to put me up for adoption. They found a sweet little family in Rota, an American family. They had decorated the nursery. They were counting the days till I came home. Just a super sweet story, right?
Yeah.
3 weeks before I was born, the Navy informed my mother, and I have the letter. The Navy informed my mother that she would not be able to get out of the Navy if she gave the baby up for adoption. She would have to keep the baby.
Wow.
Thus, I came to pass. And I have letters from my mom talking about how essentially she spent the first 3 months of my life trying to kill me. She starved me to the point where normally when a baby's born in the first few weeks, they usually lose a pound or so.
Right.
At that, it's kind of the limit. And then they start gaining it back fairly quickly because baby. And I was progressively getting smaller to the point where the doctor, even though CPS wasn't a thing in Rota, Spain, and obviously this is way back in the day in the 70s, the doctor basically sent her a letter and said, look, if this baby doesn't start gaining weight in the next 3 days, we're taking the child from you and having you arrested.
Oh my goodness.
But Mama's letters said things like, in a letter to my grandmother about her first grandchild, this little bitch thinks that she's allowed to eat whenever she wants instead of on my schedule. This is the kind of person my mother was. Oh, yeah. So needless to say, I have issues with eating, but that's, neither here nor there.
Right.
So after 3 months in Rota, she flew back to Vashon Island, which is a tiny little island in the Pacific, in the Puget Sound here in the Seattle area, and moved back in with her mom and dad.
Okay.
With a 3-month-old baby. Over the course of the next year, Mama would basically, my grandparents started raising me. And my mother was out partying and kind of back to her old life and doing whatever the hell she wanted. And whenever grandma would say, hey, I need you to step up and be a mom, my mother would take me to the parties and leave me with whoever.
Oh my gosh, no.
Yeah. So when I was a little over a year old, Mama got married, met a nice young man from Canada. Best I can tell, he seems to be a pretty decent guy. They got married, moved to Canada for 6 months. 6 months after they were married, Mama came back to Vashon Island, handed me over to my grandmother and said, take her, I've got to go fix my marriage. And my grandma, who is a very smart woman, was like, hell no. If we're doing this legally. You're giving me guardianship of Jesse. Here's all the paperwork.
Right.
Sign it and get out. So
Oh.
at that point, my auntie, so my mom's oldest
Mhm.
sister, Auntie Mabel, decided that she at that point wasn't able to have kids. She was like, I've always wanted a kid. I've always wanted a daughter. And Jesse and I have a great relationship. Maybe I think about adopting her. So I moved in with my auntie, and just wonderful experiences. Like, even though, I was a little person, I still remember like my auntie waking me up at like 4 o'clock in the morning because The Secret of Nim was on TV. And this is before VCRs or DVD players or any of that. So The Secret of Nim, she woke me up and we sat in her rocking chair all bundled up in blankets and drank eggnog.
Oh my gosh, that is so sweet.
She's the most wonderful human being. I look more like her than I do like my mom. So, and bless the goddess, because
Yes.
so after about 9 months of living with my auntie, her husband at the time, now ex-husband, told her that if they ever got divorced, he didn't want to have to pay child support, get rid of the kid. So they held a family meeting, and they basically set 2-year-old me down in the middle of the living room and said, okay, folks, who's taking her? And nobody could take me except for my grandma. So even though my grandfather was getting ready to retire from the Navy and my grandma was getting ready to basically start her golden years, all the kids were out of the house, and now she has a hyperactive, emotionally damaged 2-year-old, right?
Mm.
So I lived with my grandma for about 3 or 4 months, and then all of a sudden my mother showed back up, moved back in with grandma and grandpa. Grandma started encouraging her to be a mom again, like it just back and forth, big drama.
Mm-hmm.
And then one morning, as my grandmother was on her way out the door to go to work in Seattle, she had to catch the ferry. My mom walked out of her bedroom and said, I've had an abortion and I'm in labor. I need you to take me to the abortion clinic right now. So they put me in the front seat of the car, put me on the ferry. Mama's in the back seat in labor, where she delivered a stillborn fetus. And I was 2 and saw the whole thing.
Oh my gosh.
You have to understand, I was a really smart kid. Like, and I'm not saying that to be like, I was such smart. I was tested. At the age of 4, my IQ was 145. That's Mensa status.
Shit.
So the problem is when you have that high level of like intelligence or IQ or whatever, you can understand things like death, but your frontal cortex is not developed enough and you're emotionally not settled enough to understand death. So there was
Right.
a lot of like disconnect for me. Like I remember having like full-fledged sobbing funerals for butterfly wings that I found in the park. Like death was just a real thing to me. And like I realized this like in a real way when my grandmother, who was not necessarily an adventurous type, she's kind of a homebody, but
Mm-hmm.
grandma was a fisherman of some great legend in his own mind.
Hey.
And every month, grandma would do a date with him and they would go out on the Puget Sound. So I got to go with them. So we were in this little, like, 10-foot clunky little boat in the middle of the Puget Sound, a mile away from shore in the ocean. And I remember being like 3.5, 4 years old and going, okay, so if the boat capsizes, tips over, and grandpa is old, he's only going to be able to save one of us, which means he's going to save grandma and I'm going to drown. Cool.
Oh my goodness.
I have 4-year-old grandsons right now. And let me tell you, if they were out in the, grandpa would pick you, grandma, and the boat up and walk across the water to get back to the shore. Like,
Yes.
so I had a real understanding of death at a super early age.
Oh.
Anyway, so after this abortion, big drama, mama heals up. She decided to move to North Carolina to quote unquote find herself. And what she found in North Carolina was the local cult. I've done research on this cult. They have a lot of based in the Judeo-Christian religion, but even more so. So like, obviously the purity culture was a big thing. Long dresses, long hair, no makeup, no jewelry, no painting your nails, no plucking your eyebrows, nothing, right? And the man is the head of the household. The woman must obey, blah, 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 which, that never happened in my house. My mother ran everything.
Oh, I
Um,
believe it.
so she moved in to this cult, promptly married. She got divorced. She signed her divorce papers, walked across the hall, and signed her marriage license to the new guy, Robert.
Stop.
Oh, yeah. Mama's never been without a man, ever. Not for more than 30 seconds. When she was in the military, she would literally drive her weekend gentleman caller to the airport, drop him off, and then stand there waiting for the next guy to get off the plane. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
My
my.
mama liked to play. So
Ooh.
at this point, I'm getting close to 5 years old, right? I'm living with grandma and grandpa. I'm in a bunch of special classes because grandma, that's why I know what my IQ was.
Right.
She had me tested and was like, okay, they were watching me for autism because I was so freaking smart. All of these emotional stabilization techniques that my grandmother, and this was before autism was a thing.
Right.
And grandma was on it, man. So at about 5 years old, my mom's married. She has 2 babies. She's got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And she contacts her mom and is like, hey, I've got my life together. I'm married now. I have 2 kids. I want Jesse back. And my grandmother, being the intelligent woman that she is, said no. Actually,
Good.
her appropriate response was hell no.
Good.
So grandma sent a letter to her dad. I'm sorry, mama sent a letter to her dad and said, Papa, here's the situation. I want my daughter back. My grandfather, and we've talked about this since, my grandfather did not want a high needs, hyperactive, small child in his house during his retirement years. Totally fair. I get that. Also, Jesus. So he said yes. So grandma got me dressed, booked a plane ticket, packed a bag. We flew to North Carolina. I met my mother, my new stepfather, and my 2 new siblings in the airport, and grandma turned around to leave. And I remember grabbing her by the hand and handing her back my Timmy Bear. Timmy Bear slept with me every night. Timmy Bear was my familiar, right?
Yeah.
And I knew if I gave her Timmy Bear that she would have to come back for me. I knew she was coming back. So the plan was I was going to be down there for 3 months as a testing. We were going to see, how does Jessie do? Is this going to stress her out too much? My mother was already looking into things like home education. My grandmother was like, hell no, you barely have a high school education. Jessie needs to be in special classes. So she signed me up with a local Christian school. So I was still being educated. I missed more time during the time that I was with the Taylors in school than I did actually going to school, because mama likes to be in bed a lot.
Right.
So anyway, so I go to live with the Taylors. I'm supposed to be there for 3 months. I was there for 18 months. My mother had the phone shut off. She started returning any letters that my auntie sent me or my grandmother sent, return to sender, or she would rip them to pieces, put them back in an envelope and send them back to her. I have those pieces. So, and basically telling me that my grandparents and my aunties didn't want me anymore.
Oh my gosh.
During that time, my stepfather, so I was taught in not even just in a vague sense, but verbally told that as a Christian young woman, that it is your responsibility to learn how to be a good wife so that you can be an appropriate wife for your husband that God will pick out for you. And you're supposed to practice on your stepfather.
Oh my gosh.
From what you wear, to holding his hand when you go out, to letting him put his hand around your waist when you're in public, to fixing his meals, to doing his laundry, to making sure he has lunch every day, to praying for him. And eventually, over a very short period of time, Mama and Papa would go into the boys' room, which was right next to mine, and they would sing Christian songs to them. They would pray with them, tell them good night. Then they would come into my room and do the same. And then Mama would leave, and Robert would stay with me. During that time, I was told in no uncertain terms that if I told anyone about this situation, and both of my parents said this, that not only would Papa go to jail, but it would be my fault for destroying the family. And family loyalty is the most important thing. Yeah.
Sorry, just trying to compose myself here.
I know it's a lot. It's a lot. So this is why I'm saying in my book, I even have a trigger warning in the prelogue because like, don't read this if you're not ready for it, because it is a lot.
Right.
So during those 18 months, there are a couple of stories that I added into the book. Like Mama was pregnant again, and we were having Christmas up at my stepfather's mother's house. So my other grandma Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to have Christmas on December 23rd and then drive home on the 24th and then have home Christmas at home. So that we would do like a family Christmas and then come home for, our Christmas. Right. So for 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm in bed with both my little brothers, and I wake up and I'm like, oh, it's Christmas morning. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I get up and I go running out into the living room, and my stepfather's sister, my auntie, was like, it's too early. You need to go back to bed. I was like, okay. So I go back to bed. Right. A couple hours goes by. I wake up. I wake the boys up this time because I'm not playing.
It's Christmas.
It's Christmas. Get your shit together, people. Yes. Make some coffee. Let's go.
Yes.
So I got in the living room. All the adults are awake. They're already drinking coffee, waiting for us. We're all bouncing off the walls, going through our stockings. And Mama's like, okay, Jessie, you're the oldest. You already know how to read. Go ahead and start passing out the packages. You get to play Santa this year. And I was like, okay. So I found one for one of my brothers, and I found one for one of my other brothers. And then I went to reach under the tree again, and there was a sheepskin rug under the tree with a newborn baby on it. My mom had given birth during the night, and that's how I met my little brother.
Oh my gosh. What?
Isn't that the sweetest thing?
My head is spinning right now.
He was so tiny and so cute, and he was my baby, It was, oh. So anyway, so eventually, over 18 months of my grandmother trying to get a hold of my mom, she finally contacted, I think she sent like a sign-only letter or something that basically said, look, I have custody of Jessie. I have full guardianship of Jessie. Mm-hmm. I am flying down there on this date. If you are not at your home with my granddaughter, I will be having you arrested.
Good for her.
And Mama was like, well, I don't know. I never got any letters from you. I mean, we've just been so busy. I don't know. So Grandma shows up. Mama made a point to not allow Grandma and I to be in the same room together alone. I was constantly watched by both her and Papa. I was corrected immediately if I even started leaning toward an uncomfortable subject. Grandma was there for 5 days. On the 4th day, she told my mom, I have custody of Jessie. I'm not having this argument with you. Jessie and I are going out to lunch together. And we did. We went out to lunch. Good. We ate lunch at McDonald's, got a habit chicken nuggets, and curled up in the car afterwards. And we're just talking. And Grandma's like, okay, kid, something's wrong. What's up? And I was like, nothing. It's fine. Everything's fine. And she's like, no, we don't keep secrets in this household.
Right.
What's going on? Mm-hmm. And I told her everything. Here's the situation. Now, look, my grandmother is 50% Irish, tiny little redhead, 5 foot nothing, 100 pounds soaking wet. And I have only seen that woman mad twice. And man, you do not want to see her mad, because otherwise she is the most level, stoic, amazing, right? And I could see her blood boil. And she was like, okay, let's make a plan. Because my mother is 5'10" and violent. My stepfather is a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps at 6'2" and violent. Grandma doesn't weigh more than 100 pounds. If
Right.
it comes down to a fight, she's going to get hurt. So we made a plan. I packed everything that I really wanted to take with me into my backpack. Grandma said, okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to drive Jessie to school on my way to the airport. So I will take her to school, I will drop her off, and then I will go to the airport. Everything is fine.
Right.
So we go to the school. I said goodbye to everyone, just like I normally do in the morning, trying not to cry because when am I ever going to see my brothers again, right?
Exactly.
And feeling immense guilt that I have like betrayed the family trust, right? We get to the school, we have a meeting with the principal and the teacher. Grandma's like, here are all of the documents that say that I have guardianship of Jessie. Here are all the documents that say that I'm the one that's paying for this private Christian school. I'm taking Jessie home. Do not call the Taylors. They cannot know until the end of the day. We got on a plane. We went home.
Thank gosh.
I'm immediately enrolled in like all of the good therapies. Grandma's keeping a super close eye on me. We're having all of these great conversations. Life, as I knew it, went back to normal.
Good.
Then December 7th came. Now, at this point, I'm 7 years old. I was listening to Bing Crosby's Christmas album because Christmas.
Yes.
I was in my dress-up clothes, bare feet, and I'm dancing around the living room. So the rule in Grandpa's house was I could listen to anything I wanted to as long as I had his big old Navy headphones on. And I mean, these things were clamshells. Like they were the size of my head.
Big honking ones.
Right. And it was literally the album. This was record player time. This was before 8-track. Like I am old. Okay. And so I'm dancing around or whatever. And Grandma and Grandpa had sort of, at this point, they're living in Kent, Washington at a retirement trailer park. So kind of a nicer trailer park, you know, but I mean, Grandpa's a Navy man. He doesn't have loads of money. I mean, Grandma works as a secretary for a junior high school. So they're on a budget.
Right.
And we had the little trailer at the front of the park. And then if you walk down the main road about 3 or 4 blocks down the main road, you will see the post office area for the trailer park. Still in the trailer park, just like down the road a bit.
Yeah.
And so every day after dinner, Grandma and Grandpa would hold hands and they would take a walk down to the end of the lane to pick up the mail. And that was their 5 minutes without a hyperactive 7-year-old in their house. They could have a breather, have any of their serious talks, and walk back home.
For sure.
On December 7th, 1985, they left to go take their walk. I'm listening to Bing Crosby. Everything is normal. All of a sudden, there's a knock on the door. Now, typical 7-year-old, you don't think of all the things. So I just opened the door. And there's a lady there that I've never seen before. And she goes, come quickly, your mommy's in the car. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't go with strangers.
Right.
And she looked completely shocked. And she goes, you're a very good girl. And then she turned around and walked away. And I shut the door and I was like, okay, wait. I know I did the right thing, but this feels like something a grown-up should know about. I don't know where Grandma and Grandpa are. I'm calling my auntie. Because Auntie Mabel literally lived a half mile away. She could be there in 30 seconds, right? So I walk over to the other side of the living room to pick up the phone. All of a sudden, the door bursts open. And I mean, like, nearly came off its hinges. And my mother, all 5'10" terrifyingness of her, storms through the door, grabs me by the arm, kicking and screaming, drags me down the steps. I had splinters in my arms. I'm still barefoot. It's December. Drags me down the stairs, throws me in the back of a car where the stranger was driving next to my little brother.
Stop.
Who, of course, goes into hysterics because you've just thrown a 7-year-old at him. And then my mother climbs into the front seat and starts cussing me out for upsetting my little brother.
What?
By the time my grandparents got back from their walk, there were 6 police cars in their front yard. The neighbors saw everything and called the cops. They missed us by less than 30 seconds.
Oh my gosh.
We drove for 3 hours. crossing into Oregon, which that's crossing state lines with a minor,
Yeah.
which means the FBI is now involved.
Yes.
We pulled over at a gas station. I am still sobbing in the back. It's been 3 hours and I am still like barely keeping my shit together.
Right.
My mom, the lady who was driving, Mary Sue, pulled the car over and said, okay, here you go. My mom turns around to me and is like, okay, do you want to talk to your grandma? Yes.
Of course.
She's like, okay, I will let you talk to her. But if you cry, I'm hanging up the phone. So I like pulled my shit together because I don't know what's going on. We get out. Mama carries me because it's gravel and I'm barefoot in December. Carries me over to one of those, remember those old fashioned phone booths with like the door, the full door?
Yep.
Go in, she puts the quarter in, she calls her mother. Like I said, I've only heard Grandma mad twice, but I could hear that woman coming through the phone from all the way down where I was. You bring my granddaughter back this minute.
Yes.
And my mom, calm as they come. Do you want to talk to her? She hands me the phone. I said, Grandma. She said, Jesse. And I completely broke down. I just couldn't.
Right.
My mom grabbed me by the back of the shirt, opened the door, threw me out onto the gravel. Mary Sue picked me up off the ground, tucked me into the back seat, and I immediately fell asleep, dead asleep.
Oh my
My brain shut down to protect me at that point.
Yes.
By the time we got to the place we were staying that night, so to back up, my mother at that point was the North Carolina director of a nonprofit called WEVA, which stands for Women Exploited by Abortion. Please understand, just to clarify, I'm pro-choice, very much so.
Right.
So Mary Sue was the national director of WEVA. They met at a conference, and now understand, Mary Sue, very sweet lady, precious, precious heart, very, she believes things way too easily, a little bit gullible. And grandma and my mother was like, oh, you know, I have a daughter, but my mother stole her from me and she's abusing her and I don't have the money to get her back. And so she talked her into going and kidnapping me. We drove to one of the other members of WEBA lived outside of Portland, and we drove to her house. By the time we got there, it was dark, but I remember the light in the window because she had a lamp. The whole house was dark because it was late, right?
Right.
But there was a lamp on in the front window. And I just remember feeling so safe for just a moment, so welcomed into this lady's space. Her name was Esther, older lady, much older. We get in, we get everybody settled. Mama's on the couch, Mary Sue's in the guest room, the baby's on the floor next to me asleep. It's dark, it's quiet, and my mother starts in on me. How could you betray the family? Why did you go with your grandmother? I told you she was dangerous. And I told her, this is what Robert's doing to me every night. When you go on speaking engagements, this is what happens to me. And my mother said, oh God, tell me you didn't tell your grandmother that. And rolled over and went to sleep. It's the only time we ever discussed it.
Oh my gosh.
The next morning, I was dressed as Mary Sue's aborted son under the name Jeremy Nerat, which is I have the ticket. So I was under her aborted son's name. They dressed me as a little boy. We got to the airport. They turned the car in. We split up. Mary Sue and I went on the plane from this direction. Mama, wearing a wig, sunglasses, and carrying a small baby, got on the plane in another direction. From what I understand, the FBI was on the plane tracking my mother, but they didn't know where I was. They lost us in the Atlanta airport. Mary Sue flew back to Michigan, and I went home to North Carolina. The next day, Papa came into my room looking scared. He had my coat. He put my coat on me, dropped me out the back window to a neighbor as 6 police cars roared up our driveway. And I hid in the neighbor's closet for 3 hours. And I didn't see my family again for almost 3 years, a little over 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
I stayed at different WEBA members' houses in hiding. I wasn't allowed to go out. I saw my siblings occasionally. And all this time, during this 2+ years, my grandma and grandpa were fighting tooth and nail to get custody of me. My mother was arrested. She went to jail for 3 days.
What?
3 days. Because her local church, Reed Cult, and she was also a member of an organization which is still around. It's called the La Leche League, which is a pro-nursing organization. So they basically do things like help you get the materials you need to be able to nurse your baby, encourage you to be like a full-time nursing mother, blah, 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 all that, which I have no problem with. You want to nurse, girl, go. Just you do you, boo.
Right.
So La Leche League wrote a letter to the judge telling him that a baby will have significant damage done to its mental capacity if it's not being nursed. So you have to let her out of jail. And there was just like a half a dozen letters from like her pastor and a couple of other people in the community that were like, no, Dolores is an upstanding citizen. She would never do this, da, 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 da. So they let her out.
But
my stepfather, yeah. And I get that question all the time. Oh, so your mom went to jail? No.
No, not really.
No. My stepfather was never arrested. They did try to build a case for him. They had me meet with a social worker to go over everything. Now you have to remember, this is 1985, 1986. Social work today is vastly different than social work back then.
100%.
And in one of my grandmother's boxes, I found the cassette tape of the interview with me and the social worker. They brought in an older male social worker to talk to me about the sexual abuses happening with my stepfather.
Stop it.
And of course, I repeated all the talking points that my mother had said.
Oh.
So they couldn't prove anything. So he never got charged.
Gosh.
So 2.5 years into me being in hiding, my grandparents are back in court. They're in North Carolina this time. They've been in court in Washington State, flying back to North Carolina, flying back to Washington, back and forth, just trying to, like, where is my granddaughter, right?
Right.
The judge in Washington State said that not only should my parents not have custody of me, but there are questions on whether or not they should have custody of their other 3 children.
Absolutely.
The judge in North Carolina said the same thing, and then put a note on the file and stated it in the court transcript. If this case comes back to North Carolina, I get jurisdiction over it. No questions asked. Don't bug me on this. I'm not arguing this with you.
Right.
When they came back to North Carolina the last time, they were assigned a new judge. And the judge literally picked the note up off the file and said, it says here, Judge so-and-so is supposed to get custody of this case. And I'm denying that. And then he said, Jessie's been passed around enough. She deserves to be with her mom and be settled. Case dismissed.
Sickening.
And my grandfather, the Navy man, and this is in the court transcript, stood up, pointed his entire hand at this man, and called him a son of a bitch.
Yes. Go, Grandpa.
And the judge said, that's $500 contempt of court. And my grandfather turned to my grandmother and said, Connie, how much money we have in the bank? Because that's some shit to say to this man. He was pissed.
Yes, rightfully so.
Now, at that point, they had spent a little over $60,000 trying to get custody of me. They had been through 3 judges. And at that point, I'm like almost 10. And they kind of gave up. Which I mean, while yes, as an adult, I understand that, but also I'm a grandma now, and I have news for you. If this was my situation, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, we'd sell the house, we'd sell the car, and I'd start hooking it.
There
Like,
is absolutely nothing in the world coming between you
nothing.
and grandbabies.
Yep, not a thing. So, but neither here nor there. That is
Right.
the decision that they made based on the information they had and where they were in their headspace at that time.
Right.
That was the year that we moved to the Lyledown estate. So in Lyledown, it's a 3-story southern mansion with a wraparound porch and columns. There's a lake, a river, hills, pastures that are fenced in. There were 3 cows in the pastures, chickens in the barn, velvet carpeting in the formal living and dining room, 2 6-burner gas stoves in the massive kitchen. You could fit my house, my current house, into the kitchen at this estate.
Oh my gosh.
On the main wall in the living room, like when you walk through the double front doors in the living room, floor to ceiling leather work showing the house, the Lyledown house on the hill, all of the property of the house because it was a plantation, and even the slaves working on that plantation.
Oh my gosh.
It had an elevator, which never worked, but it was this beautiful cast iron elevator and
Right.
mahogany wood wraparound stairs going up the 3 floors. Stunning.
Oh my God, just picturesque.
Absolutely picturesque, absolutely breathtaking. And I went back to it as an adult. Same. Stunning. Of course, I'd probably take down the leatherwork, put that in a museum, but that's just me, you know.
Right.
So we move into the Lyledown house. And the reason was my mother, being the head of the North Carolina Division of Women Exploited by Abortion, had started taking in young women in our home who were pregnant and convincing them not to have an abortion, that they didn't possess the capabilities to raise their children, and that the child would be better off given up for adoption. And then she would gift the baby to a family she thought was worthy, with and without
Oh.
paperwork. Some of these children didn't have birth certificates, social security cards. There was no record of birth, nothing. All the births were done at home. So there was constantly some troubled young woman, basically in one of the worst times in their life, living in our home. So the church, this random church in Lyledown, had purchased this property, and they were using it as a place for their church services in one of the back rooms. But the pastor had a dream of opening a home for unwed mothers. So Mama's a great salesman. She's like, hey, I've got 4 kids. I'm a good Christian lady. I will come in. I will turn this into a home for unwed mothers. Yeah.
I am nauseated.
In
This
the 9 months that we lived there, we did not have a single unwed mother living with us. My mother did somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 worth of damage to this property. She's a hoarder. She likes to paint things like antique wood floors. And of course, our family was gross. We were gross. I hate to use the word white trash, but that was us. There was
Oh.
constantly garbage all over the lawn. There were projects that my mother would start because she was in the mood and then give up on and go back to bed. During that time, I'm literally raising at that point, I'm 10. So I'm raising my siblings. I'm in the room with the boys. It's my job to take care of them, feed them, get them to school, make sure that whatever, right?
Right.
At this point, Mama's homeschool. She was homeschooling us. When we moved to the Lyledown house, the church had a private Christian school with like 25 students. So Mama became a teacher there.
Oh no.
Oh, so bad. So we basically came home from something in January, and the locks had been changed.
Oh my.
Mama was almost pregnant at that point. She got pregnant 2 months later at that point. And we moved from now, one of the stories that's actually in the book, while we were at the Lyledown house, my mother was in the process of adopting 3 more children. Their father was the head of the North Carolina band of outlaw motorcycle gang. So these kids were damaged really, really.
Yes.
So I'm 10. We have 2 6-year-olds, my brother and the adopted boy, 2 3-year-olds, my brother and the adopted girl, and 2 1-year-olds, my brother and the other adopted boy.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm caring for 6 kids on top of all of the things, right? And caring for my mother, because that was also my job. And all the animals. You'd feed the cows and the cats and the dogs and the chickens and the pigs and whatever, right?
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, I did all of it. Like, people who barely knew me would pull my mother aside and say, "You're treating your kid like Cinderella." And then I would get in trouble for that statement multiple times through my childhood. When I moved out, I didn't know how to feed myself without helping other children get fed. Like, I
Oh.
was a mess. So I'm doing dishes in the Lyle Down house, and the sink was about 3 times the size of a regular sink, and it was just one sink, right? No
Mhm.
sinks. And the window was about 5 feet long and about 3 feet high, looking out on the property. And I didn't mind doing. Of course, you're doing dishes for what, 8 people at that time, so that 9 people at that time. It's a lot of dishes. So I'm doing dishes, and the little girl came running in and wrapped her arms around me and was physically shaking with fear and was like trying not to cry. And I'm like, right, dry my hands, sweetie, what's going on? And she's like, Mama, Mama. And I was like, oh shit, okay, stay here. I'll be right back. I walked back into the hallway that led to the office. And the office in this house was all dark wood, floor, ceiling, walls, wall to wall books. Gorgeous, gorgeous office. And I hear my little brother Noah, who's 4, screaming. And I hear the spanking spoon.
No.
Now you have to understand, when people talk about a spanking spoon, they usually mean like a wooden spoon you stir spaghetti with, right?
Mhm.
Which also, just to clarify, if you spank your kid, you need to like take a minute, because no, we don't hit small people. No,
Right.
I don't care what religion you're in. That's abuse. Look it up.
Mm.
Our spanking spoon, my mother had gotten from an antique store, and it was the kind of paddle that you would use to stir laundry.
Oh my gosh.
So it was about an inch thick, about 3.5 feet long, and the paddle part was about 6 inches wide. Minimum swats for the rest of the kids was 5 swats for an altercation or an incident. Noah was one of Mama's targets. Noah always got 15.
At 4? I mean, at any age, that is despicable, but a 4-year-old?
Train up a child in the way they should go. So I opened the door. My little brother is in hysterics. My mother's sitting on the chair. And of course, I go in like, can I talk you out of this? Like, how can I
Right.
step between you? Like, what can I do? And she says, I have to break his spirit, Jesse. He's refusing to pull his pants down. Get out.
Stop. Oh my God.
So I went back into the kitchen, and I took the other 5 kids, and we went into the pantry. It was a walk-in pantry, and it had green and white tiled floors. And we played our favorite game, because we were always hungry growing up. And our favorite game was, if this thing was food, what would it taste like? The white would
Oh.
be vanilla, right? I think the green would be mint, like chocolate chip ice cream. And eventually the babies calmed down and fell asleep on the floor. A couple hours went by, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go check. I went back to the door, and it was silent. And I cracked open the door, And my mom was still sitting in the chair. She had the spanking spoon across her lap. Her eyes were closed. And she wasn't crying, but there were tears that had been leaking down her cheeks. And her shirt was wet from sweat.
Oh.
Noah was on the floor, curled in a ball with his pants around his ankles. I thought he was unconscious.
Oh my gosh.
So I tiptoed into the room because I didn't want Mom to wake up. And I picked him up, and he jumped because he's terrified. And he wrapped his arms around me, and I pulled his pants up. And I turned to leave the room, and Mama's eyes were open. And she looked at me and she said, I had to break his spirit, Jessie. And she closed her eyes again. I took him upstairs, got a cold cloth to wipe down his backside and his legs, changed him into pajamas, tucked him into bed, and he immediately fell asleep because that's what trauma does to kids.
Yes.
So, fast forward 30-something years, and I'm in North Carolina with my siblings. And my mom had been evicted from yet another property. She's been evicted from every property that any of us grew up in. But my youngest brother had the key to the house that she got evicted from. And his license still had that address on it because he had just moved out.
Right.
And he was like, maybe we go over the look. So the boys all bundled up in one of their trucks, roared over to her old house, which of course, once again, tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage. There was so much garbage piled. It was the trailer, and the junk and the trash, like literal wet trash, was piled up almost to the roof in the backyard, just all along the back of the trailer. There had been a break-in that week after she got evicted. Someone broke into the house, opened the window, snuck through, went to the back room, opened a closet, filled it with gasoline, and lit it on fire. But then they closed the closet, which probably meant it was a kid.
Oh.
And my little sister was Mama's little flying monkey at the time, at the age of 14. And it put the fire out, and then they snuck back out and shut the window. So the place was basically going to be condemned at that point.
Right.
Anyway, so my brothers broke in. They went through everything. They came back with literally a truck full of our memories. Oh my God, do you remember this bookshelf that Papa made? Oh my God, do you remember this pottery that was like on the counter for like our whole childhood? Oh my God, here are all of our photos. None of us had pictures of ourselves when we were little. None of us. And the other thing they found was one of Mama's journals. Now, my mother had a journal for each of us, for each kid. We each got a journal. And what she told us was that when she died, we would get access to those journals because then we couldn't be mad at her. But that she was going to write everything that was going on in our life, along with like our good things, our bad things, the things that she's mad at us about, whatever. And there was nothing worse than going into Mama's room and see her scribbling in your journal. Like, oh, fuck, I did something really, oh, shit, it's bad, right?
Right.
We found one of her journals. It was for Noah. And her version of that story was in it. And she literally said multiple times in that story, I had to break his spirit. And here are the Bible verses that say that it's right.
Disgusting.
I handed the journal to Noah and I was like, here's Mama's version of that. This man's in his 30s. He's a fucking truck driver, big, tall guy. He reads it, shuts the book, hands it back to me and goes, I have no memory of this, and turned around and walked away.
Oh my gosh. His brain just kind of shut down from.
Yep. Which, I mean, I'm grateful.
Right.
You can get away with not remembering that. Don't remember it. This isn't
exactly. Exactly.
So Fast forward, now I'm 10, almost 11. We move into the farmhouse, which is where I lived until I ran away from home. We lived at the farmhouse, have all of these adventures there. Cows, we had a cow that committed suicide. Long story. We had goats and chickens. Our chickens didn't sleep in the hen house. They slept in the trees. Explained to me. I don't know. My mother had weird animals. We had cats and dogs and turtles and just everything. There was several creeks on the property, freshwater creeks, which there is no water better than freshwater creek. Like that's
Absolutely.
and we were in a dell, which is like it's like a valley in between hills. So our yard was about 3 acres. We had 18 acres total, but most of it was forest land or pasture. And so our yard itself was 3 acres, and the whole thing was on a 45-degree angle.
Oh
So
my.
like one side of the barn, you could literally jump out of the barn onto the upgoing hill with no problem. The other side of the barn, it was a 3.5-story drop.
Oh wow.
Seriously, seriously. So during this time, my mom's having more babies. She had my babyest brother with his beautiful big blue eyes. And I was there when that baby was born at 122. Thank you very much. I got to hold her leg and watch my little brother be born. My little sister was born. I actually delivered her. Midwife never made it. At this point, my mom's had, I think we figured out like 15 pregnancies. Yeah. We had lost custody of the 3 kids that we were trying to adopt, which was probably a good thing because of all of the things. And mama was pregnant, like pregnant up to here. And at this point in my life, I'm 14 years old. We've gotten to the point in my growth where when mama has the baby lives with me. The newborn baby sleeps in my bed. I get up with the baby, change the diaper, give them to mama to nurse, wait for the baby to be done nursing, burp them, take them back to bed, take care of them. This is now my job, on top of milking the cows and milking the goats and chickens and the rabbits and things and at that point, I'm homeschooling all of my siblings. Like,
oh gosh.
So my mom wakes up at 5 o'clock in the morning. She turns around, wakes up Robert, and is like, hey, I think I'm in labor. Call the midwife. Calls the midwife. Midwife's like, we've been here before. See you in a couple hours. Goes back to sleep. 24 minutes later, Faith was born. Mama made it. Papa came to wake me up because, of course, our house is nasty, filthy, gross, and we're about to have a lot of company. So now it's time to clean. So he wakes me up at 5 a.m. and is like, Mama's going to have a baby today. Go get the laundry started. All right, I'm up. Let's do it. So I'm running around getting laundry started and folding things and starting dishes. And my mom makes it down the stairs. She makes it into the bathtub because at that point, basically she went from no contractions to like the last contractions you have when you're ready to push instantly.
Oh my God.
And she's had so many births. She's just like, this is not normal. She's like, I got to get into a nice bath, see if I can slow things down. This isn't good. Papa runs her a bath, helps her down the stairs. The bath's still running. She puts one leg over the tub and her water breaks. Splash right in the bathtub. Great timing. 2 minutes later, I hear my stepfather screaming for me. Jesse, 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 Jesse. I come running up. What? And he's like, bring me towels. Got it. So I run out to the living room, grab a bunch of towels from the pile on the couch, and I put it through the curtain. We didn't have a door in our bathroom. Privacy was not allowed. We had a curtain. I opened up the curtain, did one of these numbers, like I'm not looking, but here's the towels. And mama goes, you have to come catch the baby. So I go in and my mother is standing in the bathtub with her arms over Papa's shoulders, leaning against him. Papa's outside the tub, leaning against her. And the baby is literally on her way out. So I climbed, hit the floor, boom, with the towels, climbed between Papa and Mama on the floor, up over the bathtub, and like this, just in time to catch my baby sister.
Oh my gosh.
And I got to tell you, I know I've got 4 grandbabies, but this is the most beautiful child you've ever seen.
Oh.
Did not open her eyes, barely cried, We were prepared for a home birth, so we had like all the suctiony things. We knew what to do, you know. And we get her all wrapped up in a towel, cut the cord, and my mom's still standing in the tub with like the cord hanging between her legs like a soap on a rope. And she's like, well, is it a boy or a girl? And I was like, oh, we never checked. And so Papa and I very carefully peeled the blankets away. Now remember, at this point, Faith has not opened her eyes. Her eyes are still glued shut.
Oh.
We open the towels and Papa and I both burst into tears. Oh my God, it's a girl. And my mother goes, oh shit, what am I going to do with a girl?
Oh my gosh.
So I take the baby upstairs. Papa stays downstairs to help Mama take a shower and see if we get the placenta taken care of, all the other things that go with having a baby.
Right.
Faith has still not opened her eyes. I start to peel the towels away to put the world's tiniest diaper on her. And I'm terrified that the sticky part of the diaper is going to get stuck on her skin and rip something, because baby skin is really soft, you know?
Right.
And she immediately, as soon as I take the towels off, starts freaking out. It is cold. I am wet.
Yes.
What is happening? There's no boob. What? This is unacceptable.
Yes.
And I'm like, and she's kicking, and I'm trying to get the diaper on so I can get the onesie on. And finally I went, fuck it, and reached over and grabbed a blanket, wrapped her up in it real tight, and then held her close to my chest. Immediately stopped crying.
Oh.
Still has not opened her eyes. So I'm just sitting there enjoying the new baby smell, looking at my little sister, and she opens her big, beautiful brown eyes and sees me literally 2 inches away from her face and completely startles. Whoa!
Oh my gosh. Like, what the hell?
Yep. So Faith was my baby. She was my first baby. Also, when I was 14, Mama moved a young lady into one of the other rooms who was pregnant. She was 8 months along. She was 16. And she had the unmitigated audacity in a small southern town in the late 80s, early 90s of getting pregnant by a black man.
Oh my goodness.
Much drama. The pastor of our church actually contacted her parents and said, if you guys don't handle this quietly, you will not be allowed to come back to church.
Stop it.
Yeah. Our town literally had KKK rallies in the main street regularly. It was a place to grow up for a lot of reasons. So Autumn moved in with us. Her and I became friends. I'm 14, she's 16. Of course, Mama's putting her through the boot camp, took her away from all of her friends, her family, the man who was the father of her baby, gave her like all the talking to about how you're 16, you haven't graduated high school, you don't have a job, how are you going to take care of a baby, how are you going to pay rent, here's what everything costs. Convinced her to give the baby up. So 2:00 in the morning, my light goes on and it's Autumn, and she's like pregnant out here, this tiny little body. And she says, Jessie, I don't feel good. And I was like, oh honey, I'm sorry, do you want to just come lay down in bed with me, we'll just talk? She's like, okay. So she curls up in bed next to me and we're chatting, and I was like, you seem like you're feeling a little better. And she's like, I know, it's weird, it kind of comes and goes.
Oh no.
What's that pain feel like? And she goes, like really tight, like right. I'm like, that's labor. That's what labor looks like, honey. That's so. I go wake Mama up. I'm like, hey, we're gonna have a baby today. I'll start timing things. Like I'm old hat at this point. We get the midwives in. 12 hours later, Autumn is on my bed in my bedroom and gives birth to a beautiful baby girl, Miss Grace. Mama, and she's of course sobbing because she's about to lose this little person who's been a heart of her life for the last year. Mama shows her the baby, takes the baby downstairs where the adoptive parents are waiting. They had insisted on actual paperwork. So there was paperwork signed for this adoption. Autumn starts to hemorrhage.
No.
Blood pools across my bed, starts pooling on the floor. The midwives, instead of calling 911 immediately, said that they needed to pack up their stuff and leave because they were not licensed.
Oh my gosh.
So this child sat there bleeding, nearly passing out for an extra few minutes, 10 minutes, while they packed up and left. Mama calls 911. The local fire department is literally 4 miles up the road. They show up. They start taking care of her. They start asking questions. We have a child who's very obviously given birth. Where is the baby? And my mother says, that's none of your business. So they call the police.
Yes.
Mama hands me Faith. Faith is less than a year old, 9 months, probably about that time. Hands me Faith, hands me my tennis shoes, and said, run. What if they see me? Are they going to take me back to grandma?
Oh
So
my gosh.
I take baby Faith, take my shoes, run barefoot out the door, around the path, down the hill, across the bridge, back up the hill into the woods, all the way out into the fescue field, crouch down in the grass, where I stay trying to keep a baby quiet for 3 hours in the cold.
Oh,
Eventually, I hear the we had like, you know, those old fashioned triangles, the dingity 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 dingity. That was sort of the call in our house to like everybody come in, ollie ollie oxen free. And I'm like, okay, things must be safe. I take the baby, we go back home. It's fine. Apparently, when the police showed up, they called for a canine unit because they thought a baby had been buried on our property.
what?
So fast forward, I'm in the process of writing this story in my book. And I've been like, I'd write a piece and then go, okay, so and so and so and so were involved in this story. I'm going to see if I can track them down.
Right.
What's their version of events? So maybe I can like balance that between whatever my mother's story is. So I call the local police department and I'm like, hey, this is going to sound crazy. My name was Jessie Taylor back in the day. Do you know such and such? Do you guys remember the situation? And she's like, I'm new here, but let me ask around. 2 minutes later, man gets on the phone and he's like, this is Sheriff so-and-so. I was on call that day. And I was like, do you remember Dolores Taylor? And he goes, I tried to get something on her for years. Who are you? I'm like, I'm the oldest daughter. And he's like, okay. And I was like, do you remember this situation? And he goes, yeah, okay, before you say anything else, one of my deputies was with me. Let me get him on the phone too. So a few minutes go by. He gets on speakerphone with a bunch of guys in the room with him. And this good old Southern man starts asking me questions. What happened to the baby? Was she really alive? Like, what happened? And I'm like, okay, I know the family that adopted her. They were really sweet. She grew up in a very kind, loving household. Her name is Grace. She's a college graduate. She works in such and such right now. She's a very happy young woman. Like, she really did live a good life. She was safe. And this guy started crying. Like, he was just like, I know, it's been 30 years. I never knew. I just never knew.
Wow.
So I post this story to my TikTok because, like, hey, this is a thing that happened. I talk about it in the book, whatever.
Right.
And somebody comes on and goes, I see. So your mother was a human trafficker. And I went, no, because, okay, but, huh?
Wow.
I need a minute.
Yes.
So fast forward. When I was 16, my mother graduated me in quotes, because in the Homeschool Association, you don't have to fill out any tests to prove that your child is able to graduate. Basically, if you sign your kid up for home education in the state of North Carolina, there is no oversight at all. You don't have to teach them anything.
Wow.
Which is why my babyest sister, who was 2 when I left home, didn't learn to read until she left my parents' house, because I wasn't there to teach her.
Oh my goodness.
So, home educated, graduated at 16. Sure. At that point, I'm working 3 full-time jobs because I'm making more money than my stepfather. I had Papa and I had started going to college together at the local community college. I was taking journalism because I love to write, obviously. And Papa was taking computer sciences. specifically to a computer organization, like a company that
Mhm.
had like a specialty kind of computer that went under 2 months after he graduated. So that's funny.
Oh my gosh.
Uh-huh. So
Whoo.
I'm in journalism. One of the things I had to do is just wander around, interview random students, ask them questions. Wandering down a hall, I hear music. I walk in the door. There's a radio station at the college.
Hey.
Cool. I start talking to the young man. I'm interviewing him. We're talking, and he's like, "You got a great voice. Have you ever thought about being on radio?" And I was like, "Huh? What? Huh? I'll give that a go."
Right.
So I started taking broadcasting classes. Super fun, right? I'm on the radio. I was running like a couple of shows during the day out at the school. It was fun. One of the other kids who was going to school had a regular job at a little AM station down in the town where I lived. Hey, they're looking for another DJ. Are you interested? Hell yeah, get paid for this? Sure.
Right.
By the time I left home, I was the only female DJ on 4 radio stations. I was 6 weeks away from my photo shoot to take over the morning show on a 100,000-watt top 40 station covering 4 states.
Oh my.
And my mother told me that I was getting, quote, too worldly and needed to come home, and I'm not kidding you, and learn to make quilts.
What?
I wasn't home to take care of her or the kids.
She lost her Cinderella.
Yes, she did.
Oh.
So the day before my last day on the radio station, I had sold my own spots and had a Christian music show on one of the AM stations, which I was really proud of. And also, and more importantly, it gave me the opportunity to interview a bunch of my favorite artists. So just saying.
Right.
It's a week before my 19th birthday. And Papa gave me a spanking for having a bad attitude about quitting my job. And I went, for the first time in my entire life, I went, okay, this isn't okay. I'm a grown-up now. Grown-up, I'm an adult. Like, I'm an adult. What is this? Isn't right. I gotta go. I gotta go. I can't be here. I gotta go.
Mm-hmm.
So I packed my bag, cleaned my room, didn't want to leave a mess, packed my bag, said goodbye to all the kids, went to work.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to take the van to the bus station, use my paycheck to buy a bus ticket and go up to Mary Sue's house in Michigan. Mary Sue's 2 children were at a inner city commune in Chicago by the name of Jesus People USA. And I figured, okay, if I go there and they tell me that I'm being a rebellious, non-Christian, evil little girl, I will go home and do what's right. But I really think this isn't okay.
Mm-hmm.
I go to the radio station. Of course, I'm going to finish out my day, say goodbye to all my listeners, da-da-da. I'm on the radio. My parents show up. They go into my office and ransack it and find my bag. Then they broke into the studio where I am live on air and start cussing me up one side and down the other. So, of course, I'm like, mute, do the thing, get the, and so I'm setting the radio station up to go, yeah, sure, I know, I'm a bitch, it's great. Anyway, for 3 hours, my mother stood and told me that I was demon possessed, that I was evil, that I was breaking family loyalty, that I was out from under the umbrella of God's protection, that, all the things. And Papa didn't say a word. In 3 hours, then he turns to my mother and he says, go home, Dolores. Mama never listens to Papa, but that day she did. She got in the car, she went home, and Papa and I sat there. And he goes, are you pregnant? No. Are you on drugs? No. Are you on your period? Really?
Like, what?
No, Papa, this is not okay. I've told you for years I don't want to be here. You've always said, someday, Jesse, you get to leave, but I'm stuck. I'm leaving.
Right.
So he spent about a half hour, 45 minutes talking me into coming home. Just come home for one more night. I will find you a safe place to sleep tomorrow. I'm like, no, fuck you. I'm sleeping in my office. And he's like, no, it's not safe. Just come home. Just come home. that point, sure, why not?
Right.
But I'm leaving tomorrow. You're not
Exactly.
keeping me there. I go home, about a half-hour drive, get home, walk up to the front door. There's a note on the door from my little brothers. And it says, Sissy, we're so sorry we have been bad. We promise to clean the house. Please don't leave us.
No. Oh my gosh.
So I went in, hugged my brothers, went upstairs to my room, sat down on the bed, put my bag on the floor. And my littlest brother, the one that I was there when he was born, little Judah, climbs up on my bed. He's like 7 at that point. He puts his arms around my waist and starts crying. And I'm like, buddy, what is going on? And he's like, I'm so sorry I was bad. I'm so sorry I was bad. I'm so sorry I was bad. I promise to be good. Please don't leave. Please don't leave. And the baby sister, the one that I delivered, little Faith, she climbs up on my lap, puts her knees on my lap so that she can look me in the eye. She holds my face with her hands. She looks at me with those big brown eyes and she's like, Sissy, does you has demons?
Oh,
No,
hell no.
no, sweet girl, I don't have demons. Okay, because Mama said you has demons, but I prayed to Jesus so that you'd be okay and you could stay home with me.
Oh.
That night, I had a full-size bed, right? Because I always had some kids sleeping with me.
Right.
That night, all 6 of my brothers and sisters slept with me. At around 2 a.m., I felt someone holding my hand. And I looked over the edge of the bed, and my littlest brother, Judah, had been pushed off the bed.
Oh my goodness.
He had pulled all the sweaters out of my drawer and made himself a little bed next to me so he could hold my hand.
Oh.
And I found out later from Mary Sue, when I finally got to Michigan, I found out later that they probably saved my life. Mama was on the phone with Mary Sue for the entire night, basically saying that she made me and she had a right to kill me.
Oh, wow.
So the next day, I immediately moved to join an inner city commune in Chicago because that's what you do.
Thank goodness.
Out of the frying pan, right into the freaking fire.
Yes.
I mean, like, okay, don't get me wrong. I think that the Jesus people have there are some magical moments that can happen in that level of community. But essentially, you're kind of in the position of depending on the ministry for everything. For your food, your electricity, where you're going to live, who your roommates will be, what kind of safety protocols you have available to you. You're not allowed to leave the building without a buddy, even to walk across the street. I was 19 when I moved in. And the rule at Japuza is no dating for the first year.
Okay.
Okay. You're here to serve God. You are not here for your MRS degree. You are here to serve God. Which, I mean, everybody shows up and is like, oh my God, all these really good looking, sweet, kind Christian men who just want to serve the Lord. Always a challenge. Just got to say it.
Right.
So after you've been there a year, let's say you're interested in someone. You go to your family head, the married couple who you are under the umbrella of their protection with God, and you submit for them. I'm interested in so-and-so. I would like to get to know them. Because at this point, you're not allowed to talk to the opposite sex. You're not allowed to communicate with them. You're not allowed to hang out with them. You're not allowed to watch movies with them. Nothing. Wow. And then they go to that person's family head, and they decide whether or not that person and you are spiritually and emotionally ready to begin a relationship.
Okay.
So the man that submitted for me was 31. I was 19.
Stop. What?
And let me tell you something. This guy, I don't want to say he was abusive necessarily, but I will say he was exceptionally controlling. If I wanted to go out with my girlfriend, for example, I had to make sure that he had food, that I'd gotten him dinner, that that our room was clean, that he had a buddy to play with that night, to watch movies with or whatever. And if I wasn't home at the time that I said I would be, my phone would blow up. And I would get treated like shit for the next 3 days to pay for it. Anyway, so I married this man. I was married to him for 10 years, 10 long years.
Oh my.
And I'm telling you what, knowing what I know now about like the dating scene and relationships and sexual identity and on and on and on, I'm sorry, really what I needed to do was have a makeout session and move the fuck on.
Right.
This was not a marriage material kind of thing. But you got to remember, I had been groomed from the time I was 5 years old to be a caretaker for older men. Like this guy was the kind of guy who would be like, because our bed was in a loft, because the Japuza building is actually the old Chelsea Hotel building. So all of the hotel rooms have been revamped into like mini apartments. And then all the food is cooked in the main kitchen downstairs. So they've just fixed big meals for everyone. And then each floor has their own kitchen, like one kitchen and 2 main living rooms that you can share.
Okay.
So very communal, right?
Yeah.
So this guy would literally wake me up in the middle of the night and be like, honey, my blanket fell off the edge of the bed and I'm cold. And I would get up and get it for him.
No.
Fine, get up, climb down a ladder, even though I'm the one that has a problem with sleeping and nightmares and insomnia. Sure. Let me tuck you back in. 10 years.
No.
No. It was, bless his heart.
Like, bless his heart. Trust me, I got family in the South. I know exactly what that means.
Yes, it does. That's exactly what that means.
Yeah.
So during my trip to my visit at Japuza, I told my family I will be there for 2 weeks and then I will come home and we will make things right.
Mm-hmm.
After 2 weeks, I was like, fuck no, I'm out. I'm staying out.
Right.
I would call home and talk to each of my siblings, which, I mean, you know, all of these kids, that's like an hour conversation right there.
Yeah.
I would call and talk to my siblings. Then I would talk to Papa, who would be all like, oh, I can't believe you're not coming home. I feel like I lost my best friend.
Oh, gross.
I have the letters that he sent me during my time at Japuza. And when I had a therapist look at that, I didn't even tell him what had gone on in my relationship with Papa. He read the letters and was like, you realize this man treats you like his girlfriend, right?
Oh.
Yeah. Creepy, fucked up. So then Mama would get on the phone and spend somewhere between 45 minutes to an hour cussing me out, telling me, oh, Papa lost his job and that's your fault. He can't concentrate because he's all bummed and he's worried about you. I'm sick and it's your fault. Oh, by the way, I'm pregnant again. And if you will come home, I will give you this baby to raise.
Like, I've raised all your other babies.
Also, you're going to give a 19-year-old a new baby. Congratulations. Here's 18 years of work. What's wrong with you? So eventually I stopped talking to my mother and I would just talk to my siblings. And then she cut that off, changed their phone number. Any letters that I would mail to my brothers and sisters would get ripped to pieces and mailed back to me. They were told that I was demon possessed. I didn't love them. I betrayed the family, all of the things. That I had gone to Chicago, that I was pregnant, that I was smoking, drinking, doing drugs, all the things, right? But basically any story Mama concocted, that was their truth.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Japuza. I lived there for 10 years. I did all the jobs, blah, blah, blah. Or no, 12 years. Moved out at one point for a couple of years with my ex, bought a house, long story. At 12 years, I left Japuza. And I didn't leave nicely. So at Jesus People and at a lot of the, so I'm not just blaming Japuza for this, but like in a lot of the Judeo-Christian religious organizations, divorce is not an option, not on the table.
Right.
So if divorce isn't an option, Escape isn't an option. What is your option?
Right.
So I started trying to figure out a way to disappear myself. How can I unalive myself in such a way that it's not going to be traumatic, where I just don't come home one night? Do I drown myself in the river? Do I slip my wrist behind the building? Like, what do I do? I was so incredibly depressed.
Yes.
And probably needed medication, which I know that now. Thank God for good meds. At that point in time, the only person that I could hear, so I'm not going to say that this person was the only person who was saying things like, you're worthy, you deserve better, you're worth something, please don't go, was my best friend's husband, who I'd known for like 11 years. His wife and I were besties. His kids called me auntie. And we had an affair for 6 months. Let me clarify, do not recommend at all. Bad scene all the way around. Did I lose you? Hello? Mm.